Welcome to this tutorial video. So in today's session, we'll be looking at what referred to as the viruses or virology. So virology is a term that is talking about the study of viruses. Now before we begin, I'll just remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel because some of you that have been following me, I think you've seen that it is giving you the much needed content that you want, especially for those that are doing BSc nursing programs or BSc midwifery, including those that are doing diploma programs in nursing, midwifery, as well as the public health nursing. So, uh, to start with, I'm sure that some of you have heard of what we call HIV virus. Some of you have heard of what we call the pandemic, the recent COVID-19 virus. Some of you have heard of what we call influenza virus, Ebola virus, the chicken pox, the smallpox. You've heard of all those different types of viruses. Now, as a student in school, who ultimately at the end of the day become, a professional medical personnel, you have to understand how do these viruses work. Okay, how do they get to multiply, or maybe indeed how do they get to cause a disease in an individual? So we are going to explore various concepts on viruses, and I just hope that you'll be able to follow through each and every step. Okay, so let's begin. So this picture that I'm showing you is basically just trying to give you an idea of the viruses that we're talking about in general. I'm not talking about chickenpox. I'm not talking about poliovirus only. These are just examples that I've been able to cite just to, to remind you of the examples of viruses that we have in existence. So chickenpox, if some of you have not seen the symptoms, that's what it does here. That's what it does to an individual that you can see here. Okay, creating or forming those spots, okay, or on the body like that. That is basically an inflammatory response that you are seeing there. Then on your right here, okay, you can see that there are these individuals that are suffering from what we call poliomyelitis. So poliomyelitis is, a disease that is coming about due to when somebody is infected with what we call the poliovirus. So this one, I'm sure some of you, even in the time that you are growing, you've heard of what you call polio vaccine that is given when somebody is young. Okay, so you find that when they give you this polio vaccine, you are protected from contracting this particular virus. Okay, otherwise, if not, when you have this poliovirus, this is how individuals, tends to be, because it affects, their spinal cord, it affects somehow the nervous system, and then people start, looking like this, okay, more like crippled, like, okay. So that's just an example of these viruses that we'll be talking about. Of course, we're going to explore a lot of them along this particular session, okay. So talking about viruses, even before we begin, I just want to introduce you to how these viruses, look like. I should make mention from this particular point that a virus is not a living organism. The way a bacteria is not how a virus is. The way a protozoan is, that's not the way the virus is. Okay, or the way the fungi is. I mean, this particular virus is not a living organism. You get to understand why soon. I just want to caution you, to just remind you that as we go along this particular session, remember that a virus is not a living organism, like the way other organisms such as bacteria, protozoan, fungi are. So just to introduce you to the virus, this is how a virus looks like. So if you were to maybe get a sample of whatsoever infected area in an individual, let's say blood sample, and then you tend to view that blood sample under a microscope, and then you're able to see this virus, this is how it appears like. It has got these different, elements that it has. Okay, so just to maybe briefly introduce you to the shape, so it has got what we call an envelope protein. Now, for a medical personnel, the structure of these microorganisms, they matter a lot, because the drugs that we tend to give to patients in treating these different conditions that they have has to do with the structure of a microorganism. I've always emphasized that if you are a student that is studying or that has got this course of microbiology, and then you've got a topic that is talking about a specific microorganism, or indeed a virus, such as in this instance, you have to be interested in the shape. Why? Because when you proceed to the next academic year, you're going to have what you call pharmacology. And how pharmacology works is that these drugs that you'll be talking about, if you're talking about their mechanism of action or how they work, the drugs work on the different shapes of these different microorganisms. So there are drugs that we give, in people with various, viral infections that will be working on these specific structures of this particular virus. So there's what referred to as the envelope protein. I'm going to explain very soon. There's also what referred to as the envelope. Okay, there's also what referred to as the viral genome. The viral genome, this is a component that is containing the genetic information in this particular virus. It's also protected in what referred to as the nucleocapsid. This is the nucleocapsid of a virus. Apart from that, there's also what we refer to as the viral tegument. It's just a protective layer that you find within this particular virus. Okay, so let's continue. So in the introduction, we are saying that viruses are among the most complex biological entities that are studied in microbiology. You've heard that viruses do transition from one form to the other, some of them. Some of them, they even undergo what we call genetic mutation, where they change, they tend to mutate from one form to another. So they are very, very complex biological entities that we study in microbiology, of course, human microbiology. Okay? They are microscopic infectious agents requiring a living host to replicate. So, the way a virus is designed, the way a virus is made is that other people they call it an intracellular parasite. It simply means that if a parasite is something that benefits from the host, minus the host benefiting from it. So the way a virus is that it cannot survive on its own. It needs a host. Remember in microbiology, when I introduced microbiology on this particular platform, I said a host is basically a subject or an individual that provides, an environment for a microorganism to grow in. So as a human being, you can become a host if you're infected. So we're saying that these viruses are microscopic infectious agents that need a host. So they will need you as an individual for them to replicate or to divide. Okay, so we are also saying that viruses lack the cellular machinery that are necessary for independent survival and reproduction. So as a medical personnel or a student, you have to understand that the way viruses are, they don't have the much needed machinery. They don't have the needed requirements for them to be able to survive on their own. They can't survive on their own. So that's why they have to invade, they have to infect you. They go in your body such that they'll start using some of the things that you have in your body for them to replicate. This is why I find that most of the times a virus will not survive outside a living host because it needs a host. It needs a human being in this particular context to be able to survive and divide. So the study of viruses is essential for nursing students, even medical students in general, as viral infections are contributing significantly to the global diseases, including pandemics such as COVID-19. I think in the recent years, 2020 to 2019, somewhere there, 2021, up to now, people have been combating this particular pandemic of COVID-19. And COVID-19 is just an example of a virus. Okay, so this lesson is going to introduce you to the foundational concepts and terminologies that will equip you with knowledge on the viruses. You should take note that the viruses or this particular virus was discovered by these different individual. Okay, there's what we call Dimitri here and the Matnasi Benjrek. Okay, in that is 1892. These are individuals that studied or that discovered this particular virus that we're talking about in today's um, lesson. At the end of this session, of course, on the general objective, I'm expecting that everyone that is watching this video should be able to acquire knowledge on viruses. Then the specific objectives. Remember, I've always emphasized on the importance of specific objectives. The first specific objective is that you should be able to define the key terminologies that are used in the description of viruses. As a medical student, there's a certain language that we use. Or as a medical personnel, we just don't say things like the way the general public says them. There are certain terms that we tend to use that are related to each and every topic in science. So you have to be able to define the key terms that we use in the description of viruses. Apart from that, on number 2 objective, you should be able to state the properties. State the properties that distinguish a virus from other microorganisms. Remember I said a virus is very special. Why? Because unlike other living organisms such as bacteria, such as protozoa and fungi, Okay? The viruses are not living organisms. They're just proteins. They're just genetic materials. They don't live like the way bacteria live, such that you can even kill it. No. Viruses are different from all other living organisms. So we're going to talk about the properties that are distinguishing them or making them special, becoming different from other living organisms. Then objective number 3 is that you should be able to describe the shape or the anatomy of a virus. So we're also going to talk about the shape or anatomy of a virus, because remember, the drugs that we give to these patients, they work on these different structures, on this different anatomy of this virus that we're talking about. Then objective number 4 is that you should be able to outline the classifications of viruses. Now, in my introduction, I did mention that viruses are very complex. They're in different forms. So we're going to talk about how they are classified, because classifications of microorganisms in biology makes things simple. It makes everything easy. How to go about the treatment approach, the things, how to protect a sick patient and everything. So we have to talk about the classification of viruses. Apart from that, the last objective is that you should be able to describe the viral replication mechanism. Now, this is very, very important. There wouldn't be usually an exam that is going to be completely, not having this element of viral replication mechanism, especially if this topic has been taught in microbiology. The viral replication mechanism is very, very important, because it's only by understanding the viral replication mechanism that you can be able to understand how these different drugs that we give to these patients work. So we're going to talk about the virus replication cycle. Now, let's start with the first objective, and that is you defining the terms that are used in the description of what on these viruses. Okay, of these viruses. So the first term is the virus itself. What is a virus? So a virus is a small infectious agent that replicates inside the host of an organism using the host cellular machinery to reproduce new viral particles. Okay, so we are saying that this virus is a small, if we say it's small, because you should understand that among all the different types of microscopes that exist, it's only an electronic microscope that can be used to view a virus. So it simply means that it's very, very small. It's very, very small. Okay? So it's a very small infectious, meaning if you say infectious, it's able to cause an infection that replicates inside the host. You can see in this definition, I'm bringing out high-yield concepts to say this virus can only replicate. If we say replicate, it simply means that it can only double. Okay, it can only double in number inside the host cellular organism, using the whole cellular machinery to produce new viral particles. So it needs you for it to multiply. It needs you for it to survive. So a virus is a small infectious agent that replicates inside the host of inside the cell of an organism using the host cellular machinery to be able to produce new viral particles. It is also known as an obligate intracellular parasite. So when we say obligate, simply means that it's only sticking to that. It has no other way. That is obligate. Okay? It has no any other alternative. It simply means that it's an obligate intracellular parasite. What we mean is that obligate, there is no other way for it to survive. Intracellular meaning it's found inside the cell of a living host. So it's a parasite. Simply means that it's the one that is benefiting from the host without the host benefiting from it. So it's an obligate intracellular parasite. It's just a term that we use to describe it. It's not that a virus is a parasite, no. We're just saying that it behaves like an obligate intracellular parasite. Then there's also what we refer to as a virion. A virion. So a virion is the complete infectious virus particle. So the entire virus particle itself, collectively, we refer to it as what? As a virion. We say a virion. So if they say this is a virion, they are talking about the entire virus particle that is able to cause an infection, which includes a genome containing either DNA or RNA. You should know that from this particular point, a virus inside its genome, inside its nucleocapsid there, where there's genetic information, it can have either what referred as DNA, DNA, or what referred to as RNA. I think you are familiar with what these abbreviations mean. When we say RNA, that is ribonucleic acid. When we say DNA is what? Deoxyribonucleic acid. I think you're familiar with these particular terms. Okay? Then talking about the genome itself. So a genome is a complete set of genetic information. So a genome is a complete set of genetic information. So that genetic information that you find inside the nucleic acid here, we refer to it as what? As a genome. It could be RNA or it could be DNA, depending on the type of the virus that we're talking about. So as we start classifying viruses, you'll be hearing me talking about this one is an RNA kind of virus, this one is a DNA kind of virus. It simply means that inside this genome, it contains either RNA or what? Or DNA. Apart from that, there is what we refer to as the DNA replication. Remember, even in the definition, we said for this virus to be able to multiply or replicate, it has to be able to perform some DNA replication mechanism. So when we say DNA replication, we simply mean that doubling the DNA strands. So DNA replication is the process by which a cell makes an exact copy of its DNA before division or before cell division, involving the unwinding of the double helix of the DNA. So it simply means that DNA replication, this is a cellular mechanism that involves replicating or doubling. It's like you're photocopying something. You've got, let's say you've got an NRC, right? Then you want to photocopy it. So you're going to make an exact copy of how your NRC looks like, but you're going to have two different copies at the end of the day. So even for this virus to multiply, the way the virus multiplies is that it has to perform what we refer to as DNA replication. It simply means that this information in the genome here, if it's one and then it's like I want to divide, I want to become two from me, it's going to double this genetic information and multiply and doubles. So in this particular context, you can see that you've got the first viral genome here. So if this virus wants to multiply, okay, it's going to perform this DNA replication, then it's going to double in numbers, you can see, because you've got only one at the end of the day. After this DNA replication, you've got the new strands of DNA here, you're going to have two copies of DNA. That is very, very important in understanding the viral replication mechanism. Apart from that, there's also what we refer to as the transcription. So the reason why I'm talking about these terms is that for you to understand the viral replication mechanism, you have to understand these terms. You have to understand these terms, okay? So transcription, it's very simple, mechanism. It basically involves converting DNA to what? RNA. Very simple. Okay, so transcription is the process of creating a complementary RNA molecule from a DNA template, involving the enzyme RNA polymerase and resulting in the synthesis of what? Messenger RNA. So basically, if you're talking about transcription, is where now you're converting the DNA, okay, to what? To RNA. It's going to make sense soon when I start talking about the viral replication cycle as well as the classifications. So transcription involves converting this DNA, this double-stranded, genetic material into RNA. To be specific, we're giving an example of mRNA, that is messenger RNA. It's the most common form of RNA. So for this virus to double in number, it will be undergoing these different phases from DNA replication. It will be able to perform transcription. From transcription, we'll go to what we refer to as the translation. So translation is a process that involves the formation of proteins. It's a very simple term. It's a process that involves the formation of what? Proteins from RNA. So you can see that it is a process of building a protein chain from an amino acid using what? mRNA. So you can see there's what referred to as the central dogma. The central dogma in medical terms, it simply means that you are moving from DNA, you go to what? To RNA. From RNA, you go to what? To proteins. Remember I said a virus is not a living organism. It's simply a set of protein. It's simply a set of genetic information. So for it to survive, for it to live or to multiply, it must be performing these different processes such as DNA replication, transcription, as well as what? Translation. Collectively, we refer to this as what? The central dogma, in which you're moving from the DNA. Through the help of transcription, you go to RNA. From RNA, you're going to go to proteins through the help of what? Translation. Okay? Then there's also this particular term which we refer to as contagious. So when they say something is contagious, it simply means that it can be transmitted from one individual to the other, most likely in an easy way. So contagious refers to a disease or infection that can be spread from one person to person, often through direct contact. So when we say Viral diseases are very contagious. Simply means that they can be passed on from one individual to the other. In short, they are communicable diseases. They bring about what we call communicable diseases. So you can see in this particular picture, there's this particular individual who is maybe sneezing or coughing, right? Then there's this other person again. So this one is going to contract the virus from this. Why? Because viruses are very, very contagious. This is why it was very difficult, even for the government and the country at large, or the world at large, to be able to combat COVID-19, because it's a virus. It's very, very contagious. It can be passed on from one person to the other. Okay, even here through handshake, you can say this person has got these viral particles in their hand. If at all they were to shake hands with this particular individual, it simply means that these viruses will be passed on to this particular individual. So viruses are very, very contagious. Apart from that, another term that I want you to understand is what's referred to as the pandemic, because most of these viruses, most of the times when they bring about a breakup, they bring about what we call a pandemic disease. So a pandemic is a term that refers to a widespread outbreak of a disease that affects a large number of people across multiple countries or even continents. So if they say something is for example, you've heard of what we call endemic. Endemic, it simply means it's describing a disease or a virus or a bacteria that is causing an infection within a specific region of people. Then an epidemic is that kind of disease that is occurring only within a specific period of time. For example, the way cholera is in our country. So we find that maybe during rainy season there will be too much of cholera. That's an epidemic. But if we say pandemic it simply means that it's affecting almost the entire world. Okay? Affecting almost the entire world. That's why I've put this particular diagram here, just to remind you that we're talking about the entire world here. Now, the other objective here, we've talked about the actual terms that I needed you to understand on the description of virus. We've talked about DNA replication, we've talked about transcription, translation, pandemic, genome, and the actual virus itself. Now, the other thing that I want you to understand is that understanding the properties of a virus that distinguish it from other microorganisms. This is very, very important. So they can ask you this: what makes a virus special? What makes it different from other organisms? The first property is that, one, viruses are small in size. Okay? So meaning, of course, other microorganisms, they are small in size, because you can't say bacteria, but viruses are smaller than that. So viruses are smaller than any other organisms. Okay? Although they vary in size from 10 nanometer to 300 nanometer. This is a very, very small size. Okay, so viruses are smaller than any other living organism. So if they ask you what distinguishes a virus from other living organisms, you tell them to say, one, a virus is smaller than any other living organisms. Two, the genome. Talking about the genome, the genetic information of a virus. So the genome of a virus may either be DNA or RNA. So viruses can contain only one kind of nucleic acid. It simply means that these viruses, inside their genome, inside the nucleocapsid there, they can either have DNA or RNA. It doesn't mean that DNA or RNA inside that genome is going to exist at the same time. No, they can only have one kind of it at a time. It simply means that a virus can either be a DNA containing virus or an RNA containing virus, not both. All right? Then they do not grow on artificial medium, but live only in living cells. So this is why you find it's very difficult for a virus to survive outside the living host, because it can survive outside the way bacteria can survive, the way fungi can survive. For a virus to survive, it has to be inside a living cell. That's the only way it can survive. Okay? That's the only way this particular virus can survive. Apart from that, talking about reproduction. So reproduction is from the nucleic acid. The way a virus, remember we said a virus is not a living organism. So does it perform sexual stuff like sexual or asexual reproduction? The answer is no. So the virus undergoes what we call reproduction through what we refer to as the genome, that is the transcription, and not by binary fission. So the virus uses the central dogma for it to multiply in number, because it's not a living organism. So it uses the principle of DNA replication, transcription, as well as translation, for it to multiply in number or to reproduce. The other property is that the viruses, they are highly resistant to all antibiotics Hence, they usually do not have specific treatment. This is a very, very important term for a medical student. So, the way a virus is, you don't treat it by using antibiotics. Antibiotics are for bacteria. So you don't get to give a patient who has got a viral infection an antibiotic drug. It will not work because those antibiotic drugs, remember in my other video when I was teaching about the bacteria, I said that you only use antibiotics in treating bacteria. You don't use antibiotics in treating viral diseases. For example, you can't use antibiotic to treat someone who has got HIV/AIDS. It's not going to work. So it simply means that there are some specific type of treatment that you must go and not using antibiotics. So we are saying that they are highly resistant to all antibiotics. Each and every antibiotic that you know exists can't treat a viral disease. Okay, usually they do not have specific treatment. Yes, most of them. That's why some of them you find that, such as HIV, it's not curable because the viruses they mutate from one form to another. So there are different methods that we go about managing a patient who has got a viral infection. Number 6 is that no cellular structure. Viruses are not made of cells and lack membrane-bound organelles. So viruses are not made of cells like the way there's cytoplasm. Okay, there's the way there are those different entities that you find in a normal, animal cell. So that's what I wanted you to know on on the properties that distinguish a virus from other living organisms. So in the next tutorial video, we'll start looking at the anatomy or the structure of a virus. Ensure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel because we're just not going to cover the anatomy of the virus. We're also going to talk about the classifications of the virus. Then we'll also describe the viral replication cycle, specifically using the HIV as an example. The HIV virus as an example in the viral replication mechanism.